While we are fortunate to live in a world where investigators have all sorts of useful tools at their disposal, it's a statistical truth that many countries around the world have lower rates of solving crimes today than to previous years. As a result, there are thousands of cases in need of time, resources, and determination so they can be solved. Join us for today's episode as we examine 3 cases of people who are still missing in 2025. Steve Arrowwood. 19-year-old Steve Lewis Arrowwood Jr. was last seen on April 3rd, 1975 in Gastonia, North Carolina. That evening, he had dinner with his sister at the Fern Forest Apartments before going out with a friend. He dropped his friend off at around 10:30 p.m., but Steve never returned to his parents' house in the 400 block of Chestnut Street, and he has never been seen or heard from since. According to his family, he had left abruptly once before. On March 9th, 1975, he left them a note, but didn't tell them where he planned on going. They discovered he'd taken $815 from his savings account. 11 days later, his parents received a letter from him in which he stated that he was safe and well and had gotten a new job. It would later come to light that Steve had gone to Dallas, Texas to see his girlfriend, a 30-year-old married woman. It's unclear when or how they met. Neither she nor her husband have ever been publicly named. According to reports, the woman's husband was a long-distance truck driver. On March 30th, he caught the pair together and threatened to kill Steve. To avoid his death, the woman reportedly agreed to travel to Louisiana with her husband. Steve returned to his parents the next day. His family told investigators that they didn't think Steve was leaving for good this time because he had left behind an uncashed check for $500, which he'd received as part of an income tax refund. Unfortunately for Steve, though, the unpleasant situation he'd endured in Texas wasn't quite over. Following his return to North Carolina, he began telling his friends that he thought he was being followed. Specifically, he believed his girlfriend's husband was following him. While out with his friend on the day of his disappearance, Steve spotted the car that belonged to his girlfriend's husband, and the vehicle followed them at one point as they drove. Hours after he had dropped off his friend, Steve's car was found parked near the swimming pool at Fern Forest Apartments. The car door was open and the keys were in the ignition. His belongings remained inside, while a pair of men's underwear was found on the ground nearby. On April 7th, 3 days later, a letter arrived at his house addressed to him. It had come from New Orleans, the same location that his girlfriend had gone to with her husband. Investigators opened and read the letter, but claimed that it provided no useful information. The woman, for her part, claimed that she didn't see Steve again after he left Texas. Her husband was located and interviewed 2 weeks after the 19-year-old disappeared, but he refused to take a polygraph test, and he was ultimately released. It's unclear if he's officially a suspect in the case. In March of 1980, a John Doe was found in the Robeson County woods in North Carolina. It was determined that the man had died by homicide, likely around 1979 or early 1980. The skeletal remains were initially thought to be Steve's, but he was soon ruled out as a possible match, and John Doe is still unidentified. Steve has also been ruled out as being the Will County John Doe, a homicide victim found in Illinois in 1998, and the Vernon County John Doe, a homicide victim discovered in Missouri in 2000. Both John Does are currently undergoing genealogy testing. There have been no new updates in Steve's case in recent years. The most likely suspect in his case is the husband of the woman he was having an affair with, and it doesn't seem like Steve was in trouble with anyone else. Steve Arrowwood has been missing from Gastonia, North Carolina since April 3rd, 1975. He is described as a white male with blonde hair and blue eyes. He is between 5'8" and 5'9", and weighed around 145 pounds at the time of his disappearance. He sometimes uses his middle name, Lewis, and has a small reddish birthmark on his chin, as well as a small scar under his chin. If he is still alive, he will be 68 years old. His parents have passed away, but his 4 sisters continue to look for him. If you have any information about his disappearance, you can contact the Gastonia Police Department at 704-866, 3300. Daniel Barter. On June 16, 1959, 4-year-old Daniel Barter helped his parents and 3 of his 6 siblings load up the car for a camping trip to Perdido Bay in Alabama, a beach where they would be enjoying the outdoors with some relatives. But 2 days later, the family event became something of a nightmare when Daniel suddenly disappeared. His parents recalled that he was barefoot on the morning of the 18th, and still wearing his gray boxes that he'd slept in the night before. The little boy picked up a soda and started playing nearby. But just minutes later, his mother, Maxine, looked over to find he was no longer there. She called for her husband, Paul, and the family started to search the area, but nobody had seen the 4-year-old. In the hours that followed, the authorities searched both the land and the water, making use of bloodhounds, helicopters, divers, and officers on horseback. As the area is naturally swampy and home to several predators, investigators theorized that he had been grabbed by an animal. Several alligators were gutted in search of Daniel's remains, but nothing was ever found. Despite the dangers of the area he was playing in, many believed Daniel was taken from his parents. His mother stated that a month before he disappeared, she saw a suspicious vehicle parked in front of their home. When she approached the driver's side to see what was going on, the driver covered his face with a newspaper before speeding away. Around the same time, a neighbor alleged that a man had been seen peeping into the home at night, specifically into the boy's bedroom. And although investigators found footprints beneath one of the windows and took casts, nothing ever came of this lead. It's unclear if the casts still exist, as much of the old case files have been lost or destroyed. Similarly, Maxine also stated on the morning of Daniel's disappearance, she took him and one of his brothers with her when she went to a local store. She left them in the car while she went inside, and when she returned, Daniel's sibling told her that a man had parked next to them and stared at them before leaving again. These peculiar incidents have caused Maxine and Paul to suspect that their boy was taken from them. Maxine added that her son didn't like water, so she didn't believe he'd venture too close to it. The family also don't think he wandered off because he was barefoot and much of the underbrush was thick and prickly and would have been uncomfortable to walk on. Investigators found no evidence to support any theory in this case. Not even the bottle of juice he'd been drinking was recovered. 4-year-old Daniel Bartow was last seen in Perdido Bay, Lillian, Alabama on June 18, 1959. He is described as a white male with brown hair and brown eyes. At the time of his disappearance, he was 3 foot tall, 50 pounds, and wearing gray boxer shorts. He has scars on his fingers and a scar on his tongue. He may use the nickname Danny. If he is still alive, he will be 70 years old. Sadly, Daniel's parents, as well as one of his brothers, have since passed away. However, his siblings are still looking for answers. Anyone with information about the case can contact the Baldwin County Sheriff's Office at 251-937-0202. The Vocella brothers. 3-year-old Charles C.J. Vocella and his brother, 2-year-old William Billy Vocella, were last seen in Rochester, New Hampshire on October 9, 1986. They were abducted by their non-custodial father, Charles Martin Vocella Jr. Vocella, met the mother of his children, Ruth Parker, through a personal ad in a Nature magazine in 1981. The relationship started with a series of letters, then telephone calls. But eventually, after a few months of back and forth, the pair met in person. Following the meeting, Ruth decided to pack up and move to New Hampshire, where Vocella lived. She'd quickly taken a liking to him, describing him as a clever and honest-seeming man. Vocella was interested in health foods and the stock market and was an only child. He told Ruth that he'd recently retired from teaching in a primary school, and when they discussed having children, he reportedly told her that he wanted a classroom full, though he also stated that he did not know how to do babies, stating that she would be responsible for the child rearing. Before long, Ruth was pregnant with their first child, giving birth in late 1982. Their second son, Billy, was born 2 years later. For the first few years, the family at first seemed happy. The couple made their money by flipping houses, and Ruth was able to spend more time at home looking after the children. However, as the years pressed on, Vocella became more and more withdrawn and spent less and less time with the family. Some days he would barely speak to Ruth or their children, and others he wouldn't even come home at night. Slowly, Vasella morphed into someone that Ruth struggled to recognize. He was controlling, impulsive, and confrontational. He didn't want the mother of two to return to work, and believed if she left the home, she wouldn't have enough time to spend raising their children. He was also known to give her a strict budget for food and household items, and when friends called to speak with Ruth, Vasella would tell them that she was busy. He even went as far as to try and convince her that her family didn't want to talk to her, didn't care, and had forgotten all about her. The final straw for Ruth was when Vasella purchased a home to flip without talking it over with her. She felt the house was in too much of a state of disrepair for her and the children to live in while it was fixed up, noting that it was dark and there were nails protruding from the walls. The couple eventually agreed that Ruth would live with CJ and Billy in an apartment until the house was fixed up. But Vasella even made that difficult by placing all the couple's belongings inside a storage facility and making excuses not to bring the items she asked for. Then, out of nowhere, Vasella informed Ruth that he wanted a divorce. Ruth sought out her own attorney as her husband seemed unable to give her straight answers when she asked how everything, including custody arrangements, would work. During the initial proceedings, she noted that her husband seemed far more concerned with splitting the assets than how they would each have access to the children. Ruth started working at a fast food restaurant to make ends meet while her niece looked after the boys. Eventually, Vasella said he would take CJ and Billy while she was at work, but he often left them in the care of his father, Charles Sr., and failed to return them when he said he would. On the morning of Thursday, October 9th, 1986, Ruth left the boys with a babysitter and went to work. Later that morning, Vasella collected the children and told his soon-to-be ex-wife that he would return them on Saturday. But he called her on Friday morning to tell her he was taking them to Connecticut to visit an aunt and he would be late home. Vasella called again on Saturday night and stated that the children wanted to stay with them until Monday as they were enjoying themselves. Ruth recalled that she heard the two boys in the background, but Vasella declined to let her speak with them. Then, when Monday rolled around, there was no sign of him or the children. Ruth immediately went to Vasella's office to find out what was going on, but when she got there, the office was deserted. A lone employee left the building with a box of supplies and told her that Vasella had sold the business over the weekend and everyone had lost their jobs. Ruth, distraught at the idea that her almost ex-husband had taken her children and had no intentions of giving them back, drove to her lawyer's office. She attempted to call Vasella's parents on the way there, but they simply told her they had no idea what was happening. She then stopped by the storage facility to gather photos of the children for the police, but was shocked to discover that it was empty. She would later find out that Vasella had sold everything at auction in the previous months. Back at her apartment, she discovered that all the photos of the children had been taken. There were none left. Vasella left Ruth's life in shambles. Not only had he taken her children from her and sold all of their belongings, but he'd emptied their bank accounts, taken her credit card, removed their address book, likely so it would be harder for her to contact his family, and had turned off automatic payments for her car in the previous months, leading it to be repossessed around the time of the disappearance. Despite the urgent nature of the case, Ruth struggled to get help from investigators. At the time, there were no clear-cut laws about parental abduction, and police officers believed the children would be safe with their father. They also stated that finding two children without any photographs would be difficult, so Ruth asked around, and eventually, a co-worker recalled that she had videotaped her own children at a work picnic and may have caught Billy and CJ on camera. Luckily, she did. The images were a little grainy, but they were better than nothing. While attending court in the weeks after the abduction, a judge granted temporary custody to Ruth, which spurred the police into charging Charles for interfering with custody. On April 3rd of the following year, a federal warrant was issued for his arrest for unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. Over the next few years, the boys were spotted in various states throughout the country, and investigators discovered that Vasella was living a life off the grid and was likely armed. Though he contacted his own lawyer in an attempt to get custody, he never gave away his location. Vasella's parents intervened by filing a civil complaint against their daughter-in-law, claiming that she abused the children, but investigators found no corroborating evidence. One promising lead eventually emerged after Ruth hired a PI. The private investigator was contacted by Vasella's new girlfriend, who claimed he was living as Charles Charlie Wilson and had changed the boy's surname. He was living in rural Oklahoma and homeschooling the boys. They lived an isolated existence, with the girlfriend stating that Vasella had expressly told her not to ask questions about the mother of his children. Though the PI notified the FBI, someone tipped Vasella off. By the time they arrived, the property had been abandoned and set on fire. The PI also discovered that Vasella had been married twice before. When he left his first wife, he reportedly told her that she was lucky they didn't have children because he would have taken them from her. The PI theorized that Ruth was chosen because of her intelligence and good background, and that Vasella never had any intentions of co-parenting with her, that he wanted the children for himself. It has also been suggested that Vasella's parents helped him with his plan. They refused to cooperate with authorities after an initial interview with the FBI. Ruth believes that Vasella likely told CJ and Billy that she's dead, or at the very least, that she did not want them. Authorities suspect they grew up not knowing that they are missing people, while the PI noted that Vasella was fluent in Spanish and may be living with them in a remote area of South America, where there is little internet access, and nobody to discover that they were abducted as toddlers. Ruth has not stopped looking for the children. She eventually remarried and became a stepmother, but has never gotten over what Vasella did. She told the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, "I'm a mom until my last breath." She still has a copy of their favorite bedtime story that she used to read them. The Vasella brothers are still missing. They were taken from Rochester, New Hampshire on October 9th, 1986 by their non-custodial father, Charles Vasella Jr. 3-year-old Charles C.J. Vasella is described as a white male with blonde hair and blue eyes. He was 3'4" and weighed 40 pounds at the time of his disappearance. His brother, William Billy Vasella, was 2 when he went missing. He is described as a white male with brown hair and blue eyes. He was 3 foot tall and weighed 36 pounds at the time of the disappearance. The boys may use the surnames Amidon, Foster, or Wilson, and if they are still alive, they will be in their 40s. Anyone with information about their case can call the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-843-5678. Their father, Charles Vasella Jr., is wanted by the FBI, and a $25,000 reward is available for information leading to his or his son's location. Vasella has ties to Oklahoma, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, and Florida. He's described as a white male with brown hair and blue eyes who stands at 6'1" and weighs around 225 pounds. He may wear glasses, and he will be in his 80s if he's still alive. He should be considered armed and dangerous. If you have information about his whereabouts, you can contact your local FBI office or submit an anonymous tip at tips.fbi.gov. And there you have the facts. Please leave a comment down below with your own theories and speculations, and remember to like this video and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.